Most, if not all of you will know that the high-level panel of legal experts on media freedom is the independent advisory arm of the Media Freedom Coalition of States. And you've heard about the Media Freedom Coalition in the earlier remarks. And in 2019, which was the year that both the high-level panel and the Media Freedom Coalition were established, the coalition issued a first ministerial communique designating the issue of safe refuge as a priority for the Media Freedom Coalition. And that led to some work undertaken by the high-level panel in this area. And we've very much conceptualized it as a matter of safe refuge. And I'm going to explain why, rather than exile. The reality is that today there are unprecedented numbers of journalists having to undertake or trying to undertake their work outside of their home state. And it's quite right that the issue of exile has received the attention that it has. And we've had the pleasure and privilege of working with the UN Special Rapporteur on her very, very important work in this area, culminating in her report 2 years ago. But I think we must not lose sight of the fact that although we are seeing unprecedented levels of journalists having to try to work outside of their home countries, that does not mean that there are sufficient pathways to safety for journalists at risk at home. And there's a very real danger that we take the pathways to safety for granted, and we must not. The Media Freedom Coalition, and I can attest to this firsthand, prioritize this area as an area of real focus, but it took an enormous amount of internal work, both on the part of the high-level panel, also the members of the consultative network, the NGOs, to persuade states to show leadership in this area. And it was Canada that moved first, and I see Canada in the room with their refugee stream for human rights defenders and journalists. And then a number of countries started establishing emergency visas. We still do not have enough places around the world that are willing to welcome journalists at risk of imminent harm. And we certainly do not have global coverage. Of course, one of the points that has been discussed already and will continue to discuss is that we want journalists who are having to flee out of necessity to be able to carry on doing their work. But aside from transnational repression, which I'll come on to in a moment, and aside from some difficulties of setting up, they also need to be in a country that gives them a chance regionally of continuing to do their work. It's no good only having a group within the Council of Europe or dotted round providing safe refuge for journalists at risk. We really need global champions, regional champions to step up. You've heard what the problems are. I don't need to repeat them. The first is journalists, a great many of them, can't get out of their own countries in time. And the mechanism to deal with that is the emergency visa for journalists at risk, as recommended by the high-level panel, and now, as made real by a number of states in this room. But as the UN Special Rapporteur mentioned, once these journalists are in safety, there are a whole host of problems. They face attacks from their home state, but they also face real difficulties being able to continue to do their journalist work. It's not clear what their legal status is. It's not abundantly clear whether or not they will need a work permit, and so on and so forth. And I think when we started our work as the high-level panel, we were telling states that they cannot leave it to NGOs to deal with this issue. and that they had to step up. And I think I would say something similar now and echo something that was said a moment ago, which is that this absolutely has to be a collective effort. Civil society can't expect states to do everything. States can't expect civil society to do everything. And I would absolutely endorse the view that international organizations also have to step up. That has informed the approach of the high-level panel. We went to civil society. We got endorsements for our recommendations, including our emergency visa. We went to states. We worked with states individually to create this visa, because every country is different. But we must not take for granted the countries that have been willing to act, and we must encourage countries that have not yet done anything on this issue to also step up and take off some of the burden. I think so far as the law is concerned, and I'll just conclude my remarks there, it's absolutely critical, and you see this in our report, which was published in 2020. One has to look at all of the legal pinch points. So once an emergency visa has been provided, what is the position if there is a revocation of a passport, which there is likely to be? What is the position if there is an extradition demand made by the home state? What is the position if there is a submission made to Interpol? And the answers, some of those answers lie in state responsibility in the host state, but actually some of them lie with NGOs, legal experts, representations to organizations such as Interpol. So I'll conclude by saying that the obligation is a shared obligation, and it is absolutely vital that states are working together as well as with their partners and media companies and the experts to which they have the benefit. Thank you.
Thank you very much.